All down. All silent. Going. Go. So congratulations.
Welcome to the Current Market Insights podcast, brought to you by Harris Partners Real Estate. Each episode, we chat with real estate author and industry leader Peter O'Malley to discuss the current property market conditions and provide insights to assist you on your property journey.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Current Market Insights. I'm your host, Kieran O'Brien, and with me again this week is Mr. Peter O'Malley. Peter, welcome.
Great to see you, Kieran.
Good to see you, Peter. I wanted to kick off our episode today talking about an article I read in your latest newsletter, in fact. You talk about agents' tricks, traps and tactics used to increase a vendor's motivation. I just thought it might be a good opportunity to break down what those tricks are, what those traps are, and hopefully educate our listeners on how they can avoid that for themselves.
Indeed. Well, the one thing that a real estate agent doesn't want on their books, Kieran, is an unmotivated vendor. Now, gone are the days where agents will use tactics such as mortgagee sale in possession, deceased estate, must sell, bought elsewhere. Agents won't use those crass lines in most instances now where they have in the past. But yes, agents understandably don't want to work on a listing for 90 days and not get paid at the end of it. And the real estate industry is commission driven. So we must understand the structure that an agent works under. But when an agent, as a means of winning the business, overprices the listing to use that as a winning tactic to bring the listing on board with his or her agency, they need mechanisms then to work the price back down to market price. And that's what we're referring to in this article.
Okay, so to simplify, you're suggesting that in order to win a listing with a seller, an agency is coming in and saying, look, we can get you this price, which they probably deem unrealistic, and then they employ these tactics to try and just chip it away until they get to a point where they can actually close
That's right. In the industry, it's called buying the listing.
Buying the listing. Okay, so what are some of the common tricks used by some of these agents who, I'm going to go out and say this seems like a pretty unethical kind of process to engage in for these agencies?
Look, it's pretty unfortunate. It's a horrible customer experience from the vendor's perspective. Some of them are more subtle than others. So by making prospective vendors aware of some of the tactics that go on out there, it helps people protect themselves. And the thing about some of these tactics that we're going to talk about today, you don't actually realise it till the end of the campaign that you've been played. The first one there is pretty obvious, and you can see it coming when you know what the tactic is, and that's the lowball pre-auction offer. So you might be going to auction with a reserve price of $2 million. The agent told you that you could expect at least $2 million, if not 2.2 or 2.3 for this home because of the buyers that we've got in our books at the moment. And then the week or two before auction, you're faced with a written offer of $1.8 million. And it's like, hang on, how did we end up here where you said that I'm sort of nearly certain of achieving 2, you were hopeful of 2.3, and now you're serving us up with an offer of 1.8. And what that's designed to do is soften the vendor up so that on auction day, if the price gets close to 2, you're looking at the bidding being close to 2 relative to the $1.8 million offer that you received a few days ago. You're not looking at the offer that's just shy of 2 relative to the agent's suggestion that on a good day they could get you possibly 2.3.
So is there any way for a vendor to differentiate between a lowball pre-auction offer as a tactic and a buyer who's just trying to be opportunistic and put forward an offer on a property they know is probably worth more?
It's all in context. There's not one right answer there. I think you're in the hands of your agent from that point because the agent, by and large, is controlling the information that you receive. So there needs to be some heavy questioning of the agent. Okay, you've brought me the offer of $1.8 million. You're hiding behind compliance that you must pass all offers on to us, but you've suggested by the same token that you think we're a chance of 2.2 million. Why are you now bringing an offer of 1.8 million to us before the auction? And what is your advice on what we should do now?
Yeah, okay. So put it back on the agent to justify their position. And if they've got the legs to stand on, then they should be able to say, well, we're just doing compliance. We suggest you don't accept the offer. Or if they try and say, well, this isn't a bad offer in the context of the campaign, perhaps that's a sign that something is going on.
If your agent overpromises to win your listing and you allow them to win your listing on that basis, it will unravel in a normal or a falling market at some stage during the campaign. In rapidly rising markets, agents can afford to overprice, and the strength of the market conditions will compensate them, the agents that is, for their overquote, but not in a stable market or even a falling market. The gap between the promise and the reality is wide and continues to widen throughout the campaign.
Yeah, certainly a hairy one to keep your eyes out for. You've got another trick here or trap potentially is moving the tenants out. Explain to me how that can be considered a trap when I would have thought, selling your house, you might want it vacant so it looks more appealing to a potential buyer.
Sometimes it does look more appealing vacant, and sometimes it doesn't. What we need to ask ourselves is if we leave the tenant in for the campaign, and we sold a property tonight that was tenanted for the entire campaign, and the owner enjoyed rent for the entire sales campaign, didn't have to hire furniture for the sales campaign, and will now enjoy rent for all of the settlement period. So it's really easy to say if we move the tenant out, we'll have an improved presentation of the property. And sometimes that is the case, but it's by no means always the case, as some agents would have their clients believe. And what you've got to keep in mind when you move the tenants out, there might be 2 weeks of prep before you get to market. The hoped for 4-week auction campaign might turn into a more drawn out process where the campaign takes 8 weeks. And then the buyer who eventually buys your property might say, I'm happy to buy it at the price you want, but I'm going to need 12 weeks to settle the sale because I'm waiting on another sale to come through for me. So suddenly you've got an empty investment property for somewhere to the tune of 20 weeks. And if you times the weekly rent by 20 weeks, is it still a good idea to move the tenant out? What you've also got to keep in mind, and I've seen this many times, is if you spend $8,000 on an advertising campaign or $10,000 on an advertising campaign, you move the tenants out so you forfeit potentially somewhere between 10 and 20 weeks rent, and then you go and spend $6,000 or $7,000 staging the property, you're in the hole to the tune of $30,000 before you've even had your first open house.
Yeah, unbelievable. And I think even 30,000 there's pretty conservative estimate when you think about the rent that's happening at the moment. We could be talking $1,000 a week in some cases. By 20 weeks, that's a lot of money that they're missing out on for sure.
Yeah, so we're not saying here in this article never move the tenants out. We're just saying be wary of anyone whose advice is purely about move the tenants out at all costs and not try and make it work with them. Sometimes it can work, sometimes it can't. We prefer to offer sitting tenants a rent reduction in return for an appropriate presentation of the subject property. There are instances where I have gone to the prospective vendor and said, look, in this case, this particular tenancy devalues your property and you should not be expected to sell it under those conditions. Therefore, I'm advising you to move them on. But there's many other times where we've achieved full market price and better by working with the tenants, and all it's cost the landlord is a 10% rent reduction rather than 100% rent reduction.
Yeah, look, really, really great advice. And you touched on one of the other topics, so we won't address it, but that's having to hire furniture, which in many cases, as you say, you don't need to. One of the other ones you talk about is a deadline. Now, that's I'm assuming related to an auction campaign primarily. It's a tactic we know agencies do use to sort of say to the vendor, well, look, it's all going to wrap up in this very short window. Can you expand a little bit on what the real risk is to the vendor in that scenario?
Well, as the auction date gets closer, if there's insufficient number of bidders in the subject property, it's very hard to have an auction with one buyer. So if there's insufficient bidding a week or two out from the auction, the agent's naturally going to come to their client and say, look, we've had a guide on your home of 1.8 million, but nobody's engaging in it, so we feel like you need to adjust the price to attract more bidders to the auction. That's how the auction system works. It relies on multiple bidders trying to buy the one property at the one point in time. This has further convoluted this particular issue, Kieran, because some agents underquote by 5% below the reserve price. Other firms will underquote by 10% below the anticipated reserve price or market price, and others now are quoting as much as 25% below the vendor's reserve price. We've heard an instance recently where the vendor wanted just over $3 million for his home, and he had an auction guide at the agent's advice of $2.35 million.
Gosh, that's unbelievable. That's, by all accounts, well and truly illegal, right?
Completely, if the authorities knew how to catch them.
Yeah, right.
which they don't. But the point being is that the closer you get to the deadline, if the agent doesn't have sufficient interest, they're going to put pressure on the vendor to reduce the price guide in order to attract more people to it. And the lower the price is, the harder it is to bring it back up. We've seen many properties that have been undersold because the hoped-for buyer competition doesn't build, and then suddenly if you start low and you finish low, it's very hard after the auction to get the price back up to where it should be.
Yeah, we certainly can't forget that vendors are selling one property in the market at any one time, most likely, whereas buyers have the opportunity to sit back, watch this chaotic campaign unfold and then dissipate. Take advantage or go somewhere else. I mean, they don't have to engage, right? And it seems like a really good opportunity in that instance where those agents that are a little less scrupulous potentially can then come in with that lowball pre-auction offer and say, well, look, on this deadline, here's what the market's saying to you and it's not where you want to be. So really you should just take this and move on. As we sort of move to the end of the article, you talk about upselling in the advertising space, and you gave an example a minute ago of a vendor potentially spending $8,000 to $10,000 on a campaign. Tell me what's the upsell in advertising that some of the agencies are engaging in, and how that can be a problem for a seller.
Well, it's all paid for up front by the vendor, so it's great for the agent to have this elaborate list of recommendations for what an effective marketing campaign looks like, Kieran, but at the end of the day, it's the vendor's money where the agent's mouth is, because the agent is coming up with all the ideas all the expensive ideas that are paid for by the vendor. Now, if the property has been priced correctly and the market conditions are good, a sale will more often than not follow from that point on. But as we've been discussing for the last few weeks, the auction clearance rate is 55% across Sydney consistently at the moment, including the last week. That's a 45% failure rate.
Mm.
When you're talking about 1,300 properties going to auction and 45% are failing to sell on the day as anticipated, you're talking about millions of dollars being torn up in advertising campaigns right there and then. But agents love to see vendors spend a lot of money up front, whether it's forfeiting income by letting the tenants go, spending money on styled furniture, or overspending on the advertising campaign in the name of we've got to get it out there and we've got to give the property a strong profile. Because the more the vendor is invested in the outcome of the sales campaign, the more likely it is they'll meet the market on the day, one of the industry's favourite phrases.
You make a suggestion that if an agent really believes in the sale and they believe in the property and everything around it, they'll put their own money where their mouth is. They won't ask for all this upfront marketing. I really feel like that's the key here, that if they are willing to back themselves as an agent to begin with, they're not going to overprice to get the listing. They're not going to underquote to get the attention. They're going to price it right. They're going to market it properly, and they're going to sell it for the price they promised the vendor or close enough to without any of the hassle. Does that sound fair?
It does. There's others that would argue differently to that, which we can go into another time. But what happens is that when a vendor and a real estate agent are agreeing to do business, they're all friendly. It's a high point, an emotional high point. They're wishing each other well, and no one's contemplating the campaign not failing.
Yeah, of course.
But as we've just said, but we'll repeat it again, 45% of auctions are failing week in, week out in Sydney at the moment. So there's only a slightly better than 1 in 2 chance that you'll sell under the hammer in Sydney at the moment.
Yeah, well, as we've expanded on before, not even all of those are under the hammer. And quite often, vendors are meeting the market to get the sale done.
That's right.
Now, really good article, Peter, and I encourage everyone to have a bit of a look if they are interested. I want to move the conversation along and do our market wrap. It's become a bit of a staple here on the podcast where we have a look at what is the clearance rate, what's happening across Sydney. So, Peter, if you can take us through the numbers from our favourites, hopefully we can see some trends continuing to evolve.
Yeah, well, look, one of the trends that we've been seeing all year is heavy auction volumes, heavy listing volumes happening across the Sydney market, Kieran. So on Saturday just gone, there was 1,392 scheduled auctions. For the same week last year, there was 914 auctions. So that's a 50% uplift in the number of properties going to auction last weekend compared with the same weekend in 2023. Another 1,259 properties are going for auction this weekend. So again, in comparison to last year. They're heavy volumes. So the auction clearance rate after all auction campaigns have been calculated by SQM Research was 55.6% for the week. Last week on 1,413 auctions, it was 55.1%. So Louis Christopher will tell you that if the auction clearance rate is stubbornly performing above 50%, it represents a stable market. If it's sort of aggressively above 65%, it's probably a rising market. And if it's stubbornly stuck below 50%, then it's clearly a falling market. So this is suggesting on that one metric that we're in a sort of a stable market at the moment. Some people are getting prices they're delighted with. Some are coming up a bit short, but the majority of people can transact if they want to, and that segues with our experience on the ground.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. So a 50% uptick is sizable. And for the auction clearance rate to be holding at 55 might sound like, well, to me, it sounds like it's stable compared with this time last year, but really says the same rate on a much higher volume indicates that there is either some desperation, some opportunism. There's certainly more listings on the market for whatever the motivation may be, and there's not enough buyer demand to meet it.
Yeah, well, look, the clearance rate is actually stronger at the moment than it was in 2023 at the same time. But keeping in mind, even though property prices rose 11%, house prices rose 11% in Sydney for 2023, the first quarter was very weak. So, you've touched on a really good point there about the market's doing really well to continue a 56% clearance rate on such high volumes. The question that I'm looking to see answered over the next month is can that 56, 60% clearance rate be sustained on such heavy volumes?
So typically we've talked about seasons in the past, and we often talk about how as we head towards the middle of the year, it does slow down a little bit. I want to touch on one of our regular listeners contacted me and had a question about what's going to happen over the next month or so. And their interest was around listing numbers in particular, and whether or not the prices would sort of hold, go up or go down. Now, given we're coming towards a traditionally quieter period in real estate, what do you think is going to happen in the next, say, 4 to 6 weeks in terms of that very high listing volume and that relatively stable clearance rate? Do you think that is likely to hold, or do you think the jury's still a little bit out on where it's going to go?
There's still enough time to squeeze a campaign in before Easter, Kieran. So Easter Saturday, I think, falls on, is it March 30 or 31?
30th, I think.
Yeah, 30th of March. So I don't think anyone will be running an auction campaign on the 30th of March. But in the markets that we service, we've seen a lot of stock come to market, and we've got a lot of listings, in the bank coming through ourselves. So I think in the next 4 weeks, we'll continue to see abnormally high seasonal listing volumes coming through. As just discussed, it'll be interesting to see on these higher volumes whether clearance rates can hold. Any seller that is planning for some time to sell would have been wise to do their very best to avoid April. So April starts with the tail end of the Easter weekend. Then there's a clean weekend, if you like, and then we go into 2-week school holidays with Anzac Day at the back end. And then as you come through the back end of April, the weather is starting to turn, a bit of a chill in the air as we're ready for winter through May and into June. So I think part of the high listing volumes is, people were squeezed by the November rate rise on the one hand, and then on the right, on the other hand, they were they're looking at where the calendar falls with Easter and the school holidays and looking to get sorted in mid-February to late March being Easter.
So do you think it would be fair to say that given there's no interest rate rises since November and it's looking relatively safe that we may not see another one, do you think that any potential vendors at the moment are just keeping an eye on these listing volumes and the clearance rate and just waiting for an opportunity to capitalise if it suits their plan, their movements, their future, activity? No,
we saw some GDP numbers for the Australian economy today, which showed that it only grew by 0.2% in the December quarter. And Deloitte Access Economics had a great quote that they put out in their statement commenting on this today. They said, Australia's not in recessions, but many Australians are. And we're increasingly seeing people who are saying, holding this subject property and paying this amount of interest on it even though the rent's gone up, it still goes nowhere near to compensating us for the way interest rates have gone. Just sell it. I've had lots of those conversations consistently over the last 6 months and expect them to continue doing so. We just cannot underestimate the impact on people's finances where interest rates have moved from 2% to 6%. When you look at what's going on in the US, the markets are moving back, the anticipated rate cuts there. So I think listing volumes will probably be higher throughout the year, not just in the next 4 weeks, as people's finances are further stress tested by these elevated interest rates.
No, I think that's really fair, and it certainly ties in with everything you've talked about this year, where one of the first things that stressed owners are doing is paring down on the car, the holiday, the investment property. And I certainly know myself that our mortgage is so much harder to service now than it was 2 years ago. And it's one of those things where, we can continue for a while, but how long can we stay at this level without a significant uptick in income or decreasing costs? Really, really great market wrap, Peter, and hopefully to our listeners out there, contains the information you are after to help guide your own decisions. As we move towards the end tonight, I really wanted to touch on something in the news which I have to admit I found a little bit amusing, but really is a bit of a sad story. Real estate agent down in Victoria trying to use AI to enhance her activities or capability at work, got herself in a bit of a sticky situation. Can you shed a bit of light on that for us?
Yeah, well, it was the lead story. Why this is a lead story, I don't know why. The heading reads, "They are so lazy. Real estate agent blasted for unbelievable mistake." And her mistake was she made a colossal error trying to use AI, and she gave AI the instructions, "Please help me rewrite a rental advertisement." And they put a picture of the young lady there on basically the front page of Australia's premier news website and said, "Our real estate agent has been slammed for an embarrassing blunder in a listing for a $900 a week rental in Victoria. AI is going to become a part of our system." This young lady was probably told by her boss to start working with AI and work out what it's all about and how it can improve the business. And instead, she's become a newsworthy article for making a mistake at work.
I think we've all made mistakes at work in the past, Peter, and I'm pretty sure I've done plenty myself in real estate, that's for sure.
I just found it really, really unfair. Like we, on our podcast here, there's certain practices that agents adopt that we don't agree with, but, making some young lady who's just doing her job and making an honest mistake and making it newsworthy and, using words such as slammed, embarrassing, blunder, blasted for unbelievable mistake. You'd think she'd committed some crime out there.
Yeah, it actually, it really bothers me, I'll be honest, that an article like this gets the front page of news.com and people online are berating her, social media channels where she's being attacked. Yet at the end of the day, this is just an honest administrative error, not some kind of underquote or something that's illegal in real estate. And Absolutely. Those people don't get slammed, but this poor young girl's probably now getting, potentially abused online, and she, who knows how she feels that.
If the agent who's quoting $2.35 million for the house where the owner wants over $3 million, if they're named and shamed in the press, I say fair enough too. But this?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And look, I'll be honest, I think for myself anyway, I'm at the forefront of tech. I'm always looking for advancements in my job here and in everything I do. I use AI all the time to help out. It's an incredible tool for efficiency. It's a great way to just improve on your own experience and your own skills. It really is, as far as I see the future, because it is the collective knowledge. That's the idea. AI is bringing together everyone's experience, everyone's insight, everyone's, own take on a situation. And the ability to utilize that in business is an incredible tool. And I say power to her.
That's right. And there'll be mistakes made across the board, not just in the real estate industry. As we know, AI is coming. There's no doubt. It's here. It's going to change the way we all operate. But I just don't think that a real estate agent and a young lady needed to be treated like that way in the press.
No, I certainly agree, and I must admit I find it very cute that she asked the bot to please help her rewrite this as opposed to just giving it instructions. That shows she's probably got a good soul.
Indeed.
Alrighty, well, look, thank you, Peter, for today's episode. It's been a really good recap on a whole bunch of things that are happening across the market. If anyone listening does have a question, we always encourage you to reach out and ask us so that we can address it here on the podcast. But otherwise, Peter, thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you too, Kieran.
And thank you to everyone for listening to Current Market Insights. We look forward to talking to you next time.
Thanks for joining us on the Current Market Insights podcast, brought to you by Harris Partners Real Estate, the podcast providing real estate insights you won't find anywhere else.